Do you have what you need materially and spiritually? Is it time to step back and process an experience that you've been through? We're going to see the heightened emotionality that's been in the field come to a close temporarily. And we have a big nodal change shifting the pressure in the environment around us to crisis and conflict. These are all questions and pressures this cycle. Hello, hello. I'm Margot Fraser, your guide through the cosmic weather. As a certified human design professional and an intuitive coach, I'm on a mission to help you know, live, and love the magic of your true nature. In this podcast, Human Design Weather or Not, we'll explore the conditioning influences of the planetary motions, the transit field. You can't avoid the conditioning pressures. You'll likely notice them playing out around you. But rather than you reacting and being pulled off track, this awareness will empower you to navigate the cycle, staying true to your authentic nature and take advantage of the opportunities if they're correct for you. Let's get started. This cycle begins January 27th at 12:54 a.m. and goes until February 1st at 1:47 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. In universal time coordinates, that's January 27th at 7:54 a.m. until February 1st at 8:47 p.m. You'll need to convert that to your own time zone so you know when it starts and ends for you. We always start with the Sun Earth activations because that's 70% of the conditioning field. We have the sun moving into gate 19, activating the trait of wanting in the root center, the square that's at the bottom of the chart. The root center is a pressure center and motor, bringing that adrenalized drive. Gate 19 is tribal, and the tribal circuitry has an underlying theme of mutual support. In fact, this trait brings the fuel for support, for you supporting others and receiving support. Its pressure is going to bring a sensitivity to what you need and to what others need in your family, in your community. The opportunity it brings is to really look at your resources. Do you have what you need materially and spiritually? Where you have abundance, how do you want to invest that? Where you don't have what you need, who or what might be able to support you? The caution here is there's a difference between dependency, support turning into being dependent on another or another becoming dependent on you, and interdependency, support through each person bringing their gifts to the table, so to speak, and being able to fulfill a need that another has while receiving fulfillment of a need that you have. Person A might be really good at bringing in the income. Person B might be really good at accounting for the income and expenses. Person C might be really good at finding the best bargains. Person D might be really good at finding the best investments. Everything's interrelated and works together. Each gets to utilize their gifts to support the other and themselves. The tribal traits have a very strong theme of correct bargains. Is there any place you're leaking energy, resources, time? If something seems off or unfair, take a bit of time to be with it. This trait is not in an awareness center, so it may take time to be really clear on whether something's fair, what is fair, and then you can take steps forward from there. If you don't have the resources you need, you could find yourself being really hypersensitive to that in this cycle. You might feel an amplified sense of being unsupported if that's what's playing out for you right now. You might enter into bargains to get what you need based out of this adrenalized pressure that might not actually be correct for you. So watch that adrenaline doesn't have you jumping in to things before getting that clarity. It's key that you don't give up who you are as an individual to get what you need. But the not self mind could jump in and again have you doing so out of this pressure. The ideal is about each person in the community contributing to the resources so that everyone has what they need, everyone is empowered. The keynote for this gate says that all things are interrelated, is apparent and manifested through the action of approach. This is tribal. There are relationships. We approach each other to give or to get that support. It's all interrelated. You might find that you really like to have a full fridge this cycle. If you have this trait in your own design, this is probably something that you may notice for yourself. It's kind of an emblem of having what you need. This is also a trait that enjoys touch. So cuddling or reacting adversely to something by, don't touch me. That could really be amplified this cycle as well. Gate 19 is being grounded in the Earth's position, gate 33 in the throat center, the trait of privacy and retreat. The throat center is the uppermost square in the chart. It's the center for communication, for manifestation, for expression. Gate 33 is part of the abstract experiential circuitry. And there can be this sharing of lessons and the wisdom of our experience that comes through this trait. It's a gate that's part of our cellular memory. So there can be real revelations that can come through this trait. When you get to the throat center, you get to the end of a process. And here it's the end of an experiential cycle that you had committed yourself to. This trait is about taking the time to retreat after an experience, to go within, to reflect and gain the lessons and the wisdom. Wisdom from the experiences that you've had and also what you've heard from others. The keynote is active withdrawal and the transformation of a weak position into a strength. So the weak position is that without withdrawing to process the experience, you don't get the wisdom. And that takes time. And if you don't get the wisdom, you're likely to repeat that experience again. You're going to end up in something similar. And it could feel like you're stuck in a loop. So that reflection process is really, really important. Sharing experiences means that each generation doesn't have to start from scratch. This is the voice of the historian, remembering what happened in the past so that we can use that to navigate the future. You may find yourself reminiscing about the past or hearing that from others. You may find yourself wanting to retreat and process. It's not about avoidance. This is allowing time to get clear on what wants to emerge out of that experience. The caution here is that the polarity of just wanting to jump right in to another experience before you've processed the one that you may have just finished has occurred. And always so important that when it's time to share the lesson, the wisdom, to follow your strategy and authority so that it's to the right people at the right time. When we look at these two traits together, reminiscing may be a way that fosters camaraderie and intimacy and mutual support. You may find yourself retreating when someone is asking for support or resources, especially if it's something that you don't think you can provide. There may be wisdom shared about past codependent relationships or supportive relationships. Next up, we're looking at our long-term channel that's been with us since December 2nd, but less than an hour after we start this cycle at 2:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Universal Time, this channel of transitoriness, a jack of all trades design that's been bringing this heightened emotionality and putting pressure on all of us to enter into a new experience will be broken as Jupiter continues its retrograde motion and shifts into gate 16. Now, if you have gate 35 in your design without gate 36, that channel of transitoriness is still going to be there for you because we've got Neptune sitting in that gate 36 in a long-term transit, and we've got Venus actually transiting through gate 36 right now as well. And we're going to see shortly, the north node of the moon is going to be moving into gate 36. We'll see this channel come back in mid-February, but it's going for now. Now, let's look at one of the big shifts that we're going to see, and that's a nodal change. So the north and south nodes of the moon, those represent the eclipse points. And in human design, they're about our environment, our direction, and our perspective. So since December 3rd, we've had the south node of the moon sitting in gate 46, activating the trait of determination of the self, love of the body vessel, or not, could also be hate of the body. And that's been our background environment. The north node has been in gate 25, the gate of the spirit of the self, innocence, universal love, or not. And this trait provided a perspective of seeing whose actions are selfless and whose are not, where there's universal love or not, and potentially seeing things that were and are shocking in this world. Where have you been coming from in your life? And where are you now within yourself? That was part of the pressure of these traits. Now, on January 30th at 6:45 a.m. until June 13th, that's Mountain Standard Time, UTC, that's January 30th, that it's going to come in at 1:45 p.m. This is going to shift. The nodes are going to move into gates 36 and 6, both in the solar plexus center, which is the emotional center. These are the gates of crisis and conflict. So we have this overall theme that's coming in with this of emotionality in the environment. Emotional tension is going to be there, and it's going to be there for about 4.5 months. The guidance here is to make sure you're not making emotional decisions if you've got that emotional center undefined in your chart. So the bottom right triangle will be white in your chart. You need to make sure in that case as well that you're doing some good conscious emotional clearing, cleansing, releasing work at the end of each day. If you have a defined emotional center, you'll see that it's brown in your chart. As always, you've got to come to neutral before you make a decision. You've got to get that clarity, and that takes time. Always, there's a keynote of patience when it comes to the emotional center. We have the south node moving into gate 6, the trait of conflict and friction. This is part of the tribal defense circuitry that's all about survival of the species. It's part of the channel of mating and intimacy. And it brings a pressure to make more of us. So there is also a general creative fertility that's associated with this trait. It's called the trait of conflict and friction because there's a mechanism built into your genetics that puts up certain barriers to others as part of a genetic strategy to find a partner who's a good genetic match. This is not about, your I am and the soulmate. This is your reproductive genes that are going, yeah, that person's different enough. That would be a good person to make a baby with. Okay. And it's very base, fundamental level. The friction that we come up against in relationship can help you and the relationship to evolve. It can help it to grow and you to grow, or not, right? It can also devolve, right? If we can't work through that friction, there's going to be this background pressure of being open or being closed to intimacy that comes with this frequency. There's going to be things in relationship that may come up for being confronted. And the friction doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. Again, it can lead to growth and to development. But if you get caught up in the emotionality, and if you're not good with conflict, well, this could bring some volatility. Developing those skills and using those skills will be quite helpful in this period. The North Node is in gate 36, the gate of crisis, the darkening of the light. We have Neptune and Venus there as well. The North Node influence is going to be to see this pressure in the world, to enter into a new experience. You're going to see where there's been progress, but also where expectations of progress are not being met, where disappointment is coming up around that. The polarities will be there. So there could be the positive friction and growth, the excitement of entering into a new experience, or the conflict and crisis that breaks apart relationships. Both of these gates are part of the intimacy side of the chart in human design and the sexuality circuitry and how we come into bonding with another. So that can be in business relationships, friendships, intimate relationships. All sorts of relationships are likely to be tested in this frequency and at all different levels. So we're already seeing the preludes to this at governmental levels with talks about tariffs and retaliatory measures and so on. The key is not to rush anything. Any of the conflicts and frictions that come in are going to require patience. If we're making emotional decisions, if leaders are making emotional decisions, we may see things really devolve instead of evolve. You don't have to be afraid of this. The way through for you personally is to follow your own strategy and authority. Remember that most of the world is being run by the transit field. You don't have to be. That's the beauty of knowing your design. You can really start to differentiate what's you and what's simply the conditioning pressure of the transit field that you don't have to do anything about unless it's actually correct for you to do so. So anytime you hear me say, if it's correct for you or when it's correct for you, I'm referring to following your strategy and authority. Okay, we have 3 channels that are being created by the transit of the moon, which means they're just little tasters. The moon only stays in a gate for about 10 to 11 hours, give or take. So I'll just quickly review these. January 29th at 11:26 a.m. until 9:02 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that's January 29th at 6:26 p.m., going until January 30th at 12:02 a.m. We're going to have the channel of the prodigal, a design of a witness. So we've got the moon moving into gate 13, the trait of the listener, connecting to the Earth's position. Gate 33 in the throat center, that gate of retreat and privacy that we talked about earlier. This is part of the abstract experiential circuitry that's about sharing the wisdom, the lessons of our experiences. This is in the G center. The moon's position is in the G center, which is expressing itself through the memories that you have from what you've taken in, what you've heard, what you've witnessed in your life. And the opportunity comes here to process that wisdom, to reflect on it, and really be able to articulate it in a way that supports others, that guides and provides leadership in that way. The caution is that some of the things that you've taken in may be secrets of others. And be careful here, because there can be a tendency to then blurt those out and then regret what you've said. Okay, next up, January 29th at 9:02 p.m., going until January 30th at 6:35 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that's January 30th at 12:02 a.m., going until 1:35 p.m. We have the moon moving into gate 49, activating the trait of revolution and higher principles, connecting with the sun's position, gate 19, that trait of wanting. This creates the channel of synthesis, a design of being sensitive to the needs and wants of others. It can also be hypersensitive around needs, especially if they're not being met. Awareness of what's really needed out of all the potential needs can be determined here. It's the pressure to establish common ground for relationships where needs and principles are aligned, or for breakdown when that alignment isn't there. There's an opportunity to bring energy to making change in the tribe, the family, the community, from an understanding of what's needed that's not being looked after currently. This is a channel that goes from the root to the emotional center. So the caution here is that patience again, we've got that emotional center involved. That's required to see if there's alignment or not. If there can be that interdependence, or if this is, looks like it's going to be more of a dependency. The last channel being created by the moon is coming up right after that last one, January 30th at 6:35 a.m. until 4:05 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that's January 30th at 1:35 p.m. until 11:05 p.m. This is the channel of recognition of feelings, a design of focus energy, where gate 41, the gate of contraction, of decrease, meets gate 30, the trait of desire, the clinging fire. We talked about gate 41 last cycle as being correlated to the start codon in our genetics, with the pressure to enter a new experience. And it starts with dreaming, with fantasizing about all the potentials that are there. What is that new feeling experience that you want to have? And then going through the process of paring that down into the one that you'd really like to have now. So there's a yearning here, and becoming very focused on that one feeling, that one experience. The opportunity is to get clarity on what that real desire is. The caution is that there can be no expectations, and there can only be one experience at a time. You do need to narrow it down to one. If you're trying to have multiple experiences at the same time, it all gets diluted. You're not going to get the lessons and the wisdom that were really meant for you in that one correct one. So being patient as well in getting that clarity. That brings us to our long-term transits, where we have a few changes going on this cycle. The long-term transits are by the outer planets and the nodes of the moon. They're here for a longer period of time. In some cases, that's years. So what can happen is the not-self mind can start to think that they're part of you, even when it's not something that you have in your own design. On the other hand, we can learn a lot from these transits if we're, again, aware of them. I've already talked about the nodal changes. Both of them are sitting in line 6, the specific subdivision of the trait, the specific quality that's being expressed here. And gate 6 is conflict and friction. Line 6 is the peacekeeper, or not. So with this, there could be win-win peacekeeping efforts to move through conflicts happening in our environment. More likely, we're going to see the detriment playing out, where conflict requires one side to bend to the will of the other, where the terms for ending a conflict set by one side are unacceptable to the other. So again, the polarities, peacekeeping or not. The North Node in gate 36, that gate of crisis, is in line 6, called justice, something that we actually talked about last time because we've got Neptune sitting in exactly the same position, same gate, same line. So we have the perspective as we look out into the world coming from the North Node of seeing the crisis, the entering into of new experiences, making change that will allow progress, or the cynicism, the disappointment, changes being made that don't lead to the expected progress. And we have Neptune bringing its frequency of illusion, veiling, unveiling, imagination, bringing pressure to enter into something new, to make change, but it might not be clear, right? It already takes time being in the emotional center, and Neptune can make it even a little bit more difficult to get that clarity of whether the experience is the right one, right time to enter into. The opportunity is that when you do enter into it correctly, Neptune can really help you go into the depths of it and unveil unexpected lessons and wisdom. Saturn has moved into gate 22 now, the gate of grace or disgrace, also in the emotional center. And Saturn brings its discipline, consequences, constraints to this trait. It's sitting in line 1, which is called second class ticket. It's very much about being comfortable, being graceful, being polite. No, you go ahead. You go. It's okay. No, you go. You go first. It's all right. So this pressure brings the potential opportunity to be able to listen to the passions of others, to be open socially. There's a grace within that. It may bring a discipline quality to being polite. The caution here is there may be humiliating consequences and disgrace to not being polite. This individual trait can also bring an emotional moodiness. You may be more sensitive to the quality of someone's voice. This is the gate of the left ear that hears in a wave, the tones, the pitches. You may find that they're a real turn off or a real turn on. Jupiter has moved into gate 16, the gate of skills and enthusiasm, part of the collective logic circuitry that's always looking for those patterns to carry us into the future safely and reliably. If I do this, I'm going to get this outcome, right? Something that's predictable. Well, Jupiter's going to bring pressure to develop your skills, to expand them. Now, line 6 that it's in is called gullibility. It brings a learning theme that says the susceptibility to propaganda. So the exaltation is the talent to assess the expression of others. The opportunity is being able to see what's really a pattern that can be relied on. Is that person really bringing through something truthful, a new formula that's going to work, or is it just propaganda? The detriment is the inability to do this, to not recognize when something's just propaganda with no facts to back it up. This is key to the logic circuitry, experimenting and getting the facts in place. So there's a caution here that you're going to feel the pressure potentially to express something as fact that maybe is not. And if you don't do your fact checking, you could really get taken in by someone who's skillfully expressing their way forward that they want your support for. But when you delve into it, the facts really aren't there. If you're not doing that delving, yeah, there's gullibility, right? Okay, Uranus. Uranus continues to sit in gate 23, the gate of assimilation in the throat center. There's an opportunity with this potentially to express your unique insights, if it's correct for you, in a way that might bring a spark to the collective. Individual traits can bring through something new, something mutative, but it's just a spark. It takes the collective taking it up for it to really catch fire. Or there's going to be the pressure with this to just blurt out insights that can't be explained well and will just seem weird to others and not listened to at all. There could be a tendency to not bring the insight through to groups that you're part of out of fear of rejection, even though your strategy and authority are saying yes and you've been invited to share. At the end of January, Pluto's making a big move, although it will retrograde back into gate 60, the gate of limitation, later this year before it fully moves back into gate 41 and stays there. Gate 41 is the gate of contraction and decrease. It's the gate of the daydreaming, the fantasizing of the next experience that you want to have. This was our sun's position last cycle. But that's a process. It's a process to narrow it down to the one that you really want. And that awareness comes through the gate 30 in the emotional center, which we get a taste of with the moon transit that we talked about already. The potential opportunity here is for you to engage your imagination in what you'd like to create. At the same time, it will eventually need to be narrowed down. The caution is that not every fantasy is meant to be brought into reality. So watch that you're not setting expectations here. Line 1 is called reasonableness. What's really reasonable to bring to fruition? So Pluto is saying that your inner truth will come through contraction and decrease, will come through the dreaming of a new experience. Now, unless your Pluto is in gate 41, your inner truth actually comes through a different trait, whatever that is for you in your design. At the collective level, contraction and decrease may appear in humanity's experience, however that may play out. Pluto rules our larger cycles. When we put this all together with these long-term transits, what you may experience or see around you is in an environment of conflict and crisis, an opportunity for growth and development, for fostering the talent to discern whose way forward is just propaganda and not worth your energy. The discipline to be graceful in interactions, to have unusual insights, to cut through the illusion in any personal crises and any sense of inadequacies, and find which dreams are really reasonable to focus on. Or in an environment of conflict and crisis, you may feel or see in others bumping into stagnancy and stuckness, being taken in by propaganda that turns out to be fiction, being closed to others and suffering the consequences of disgrace, being taken off track by fear of rejection, setting unrealistic expectations, and hot-headedness. You can weave these keynotes together in different ways, but that gives you a flavor for the influences that may play out through the transit field. That brings us to the end of our cosmic weather for this cycle. If you want to run your own chart, you can go to jovianarchive.com. And if you're new to human design and you just want to understand the basics of the body graph, what's the black and the red about, the different geometric shapes, a little bit of the background of human design, you can grab my free Human Design Basics mini course. It's at margotgfraser.com/human-design. You'll also find various opportunities for readings there if you're looking to understand your design or to go deeper into it. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd be so grateful if you could give it a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe. Okay, so watch for hypersensitivity that may be there around support or not, that any bargains you enter into are really correct and fair and respect your individuality. Know that any sense of not having resources you need and perhaps feeling down or frustrated about that might be amplified this cycle. At the same time, there may be opportunities to create mutually supportive partnerships. Watch that you're not blurting out secrets from this pressure. And if it's correct for you, this weather could be really supportive to going into retreat and contemplation of the lessons from an experience that you've been through. Have a great cycle, and may you know, love, and live your magical nature. Until next time, bye for now.